So I'm going to create an array called errors. So that's just errors equals array. I'm going to be doing nothing else with this line. Then we're going to come down and we are going to start searching for errors. So the first one, we create an if statement and a block. In here we're going to say empty and then in brackets keywords. This just means is this keywords value empty, so have they typed nothing. Then we want to say errors and then two brackets because we're appending values to this array, and we're going to say please enter a search term. Okay, simple enough. Then we're going to say else if, so we're using an else if statement if you like now. So else if strlen, we're using an strlen function to grab the length of keywords. So we just pop keywords in there, we're taking one parameter for this function. And then we're going to compare this to a value. So if strlen of keywords, so i.e. the length of keywords, is less than 3, then we want to give an error. So errors equals, we can just say your search term must be 3 or more characters. Simple enough. Now else if, we need to do one more check, which we can't implement just yet because we haven't created our search results function. But what we are going to be doing here in just a moment is we're going to say search results equals false. And we're going to be calling this function because if our search turns out no results, we want to check that as well, and then we want to display no results to the error to the user. So what we're going to be doing is saying errors equal your search returned no results. What we could even do is say your search for, and then we could just say append onto here keywords. So what I'm essentially doing is a space, ending this string, concatenating on keywords, concatenating on the rest of this string. Okay, but for now, because we don't have a search results function, I'm just going to say 1 equals 2 because this is never ever going to return true, so therefore we're not going to get this error. We can test this error out a bit later. Okay, so that's about it for the errors. Now what we need to do is we need to create a check to check if any errors have come about. So if empty, oh sorry, no variable there, if empty errors do something. So if the errors are empty, we're going to search. Otherwise, we need to echo out all of the errors that might have been accumulated along the way. So for example, if they don't type anything, it will say please enter a search term. If they type something but it's not as big as 3 characters or more, we echo this out. If the result is not found, we echo that. Now at the moment only one error is ever going to be returned, but the method that I'm using here is great if you want to echo out a few errors to the user at once. For example, in registration forms, when the user hasn't typed one or more fields, this method is brilliant. So for now it doesn't really make much sense, but if you wanted to add more checks onto here later on, you could do so. For example, you could come down and create a new if statement altogether, and this would be echoed out as 2 errors. So hopefully that makes sense. If not, we'll follow along, and I do use these in most of my tutorials, so yeah, you should sort of pick up on them at some point. Okay, so else for each, so we're using a for each loop if you like, for each errors as error. Okay, so essentially for each one of these errors, remember we're appending to an array, so we're creating a new element of an array every time we do this. So for example, if we didn't have else if, we would actually be echoing all of, or adding all these to the array, and therefore we would be returned with 3 errors. And then you'd just say echo error, and then we can append on, we don't need to append, we can use a comma, a paragraph break, or no, just a line break will do. Okay, so for each errors as error, echo error. Okay, so let's go ahead and test this. Hit refresh and let's type nothing. Click search. You can see please enter a search term. Let's type AB, which is less than 3 characters. 3 characters is fine. It's just less than 3 characters. So your search term must be 3 or more characters. So ABC. Click search, and nothing happens. And the reason that nothing's happened is we've ended up here. So we can now actually initiate the search. Now what we're not going to be doing is getting to this bit just yet, and the reason we're not going to be is because we want to actually create the search function before we do anything else in here. And the search function is going to be returning an array of results. So with this array in here, we can count the amount of elements in the array and therefore how many results that have been returned. And then we can say something like echo out your search for keywords returned a result number of results. So we can do everything from this page, whereas the function.inc.php is just going to return the results as an array. So you can pretty much use this function anywhere on your website, but alter how you echo out how many results have been returned. Okay, so it's really useful for that, and you can also then adjust it for perhaps searching a different table, a different database even. So let's go ahead and actually start to create this search results function. Now obviously the basis for any function is the function keyword, and then we're going to type the name of the function, and that is search results. Okay, we're going to create the block, and all the code is going to go in here. So for now what we want to do is specify one parameter, and that's keywords. Okay, so what we're doing is we're passing the keywords that have been typed in here, and this keywords here, and eventually when we actually start to call our function as well as in here, we're going to be passing the keywords to this function to allow us to search. Okay, so we've connected to our database so we can actually use SQL queries inside of this function, but there's a few things we need to do prepping before we actually do anything. Now these three variables that I'm going to create might not make any sense to you right now, but later on you'll understand what they're for. I'm going to create a variable called returned results equals array. Okay, so that should be pretty self-explanatory. We're just predefining the variables that we want to use, otherwise we're going to get an undefined variable or undefined index error a bit later on. So we want to say where is equal to nothing, and that is just string data, and this is actually a construct of our where query, part of our query, which we also are going to be adding to along the way depending on results. So again, if you don't know what I mean, then that's fine. And total equals 0. This is essentially in actual fact I don't think we need this one. Okay, so there's a couple of variables that we've predefined. If we need to go back and predefine any more, if we're getting out some silly warnings from PHP, we can go and change them. So just because we're going to be getting these undefined variable warnings doesn't mean our program's not working. It's just PHP telling us that we haven't defined a variable and some value is being set to something and we're not sure why.